On this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we're going to discuss when your counterpart moves on, what's missing. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Hi there, and welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson, and I'm joined with my co-host, Michelle.
Hello.
And so as we get ready to go through this particular topic, I am reminded of several conversations that we've been having lately with a lot of people. And I say this especially because as we're noticing people move into their next phase of life, call it retirement, call it I'm going to try some other role, but there's some pretty significant changing going on in the higher levels of our organizations, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's the baby boomers kind of wrapping up.
Yeah.
I feel like we've gone through, I don't know how many years now, of getting ready for the baby boomer retirement, and we're just kind of in it to the end of it, and maybe not quite end, obviously,
right.
But it's definitely becoming more obvious at that higher level.
Yeah.
And
I remember we started bringing this up 12, 15 years ago. It's like, hey, this is going to happen. Well, now it's starting to happen. So
it's really starting to happen.
But the issue that we're raising is that as people move on, people are doing some succession planning. I wouldn't say that they're doing it well. I think some are doing replacement plans, right? But in some fashion, they're doing they're changing who's going to go into different seats.
Yeah.
What they're not necessarily noticing is what is going to be missing when that person leaves, right?
Yes.
And more specifically, the emotional and strategic thinking that was maybe their partner. So I'm reminded of a person just recently that was talking who is CEO is moving on, they're retiring, and the person who's retiring and the person who could potentially go into their role, they kind of grew up together in the business. They spent 20 plus years together, in different roles.
Kind of like a yin and yang. Yeah, growing in the business. And
they became, they became their counterpart. One might be, in this case, one was much more aggressive, one was much more strategic. I think we've seen other kinds of yin and yangs. As you think about some of the yin and yangs that you're noticing, what are some of the things that a yang, right? I don't even know how to say this. The opposites, what are those partnerships that are going to be different because of these new phases?
Well, I think what people that you talked about, the emotional piece, we don't, technically, yes, are we going to hire someone on the technical side, but that relationship, that trust, the understanding of each other, as people grow in an organization, the higher we grow, the fewer people we can share some things with that we need to strategically work through.
Yeah.
And, have some of these difficult conversations, even difficult conversations where we're, helping each other by calling each other out when we don't want to hear it, but we need to hear it. And there's a lot that happens through the years as we build trust and are able to be really honest with each other,
right?
And you can't just plug and play that, right?
There's always that person that we can go to that we can use as a sounding board in some way. They bring to the relationship something that you can talk to before you let it out to the real world.
Correct.
Right? It's I need to bounce this off of you to do a little gut check on it. I need to bounce this off of what am I missing? How are people going to take this? What parts of this is, that I need to be prepared for? And so having that counterpart, that yin and yang, is vital. And as somebody moves on, retires, moves on to the next role, things are going to change. Your decision making is going to change.
Yes.
And so let's just think about what are the kinds of things the partner might do. So you mentioned you can do the gut checks. I think there's the psychological safety that comes along with having that person.
Yeah,
you can have a chat with,
yes,
right?
Yes.
What
they're
else?
going to be honest, right? They're going to be honest, and You also have shared experiences that each of you can reflect back on, well, when we did this way and what happened there. I mean, where maybe someone who isn't, is new to the organization, which is great because I also think that then brings a new lens and challenge in as well. But that safety to be able to have those conversations, and it's like, your habit is now not, you don't have that.
You've got history and shared experiences.
Yes.
Both of those two things together. Even if you didn't share all those experiences, you may remember when the business did this or when the economy did that, and you had those experiences together that you can relate to those things. So if you've asked yourself the question, who's that person in your world and are they going to be moving on? Now, without them, what are we risking? Like, what's the risk of not having your counterpart? Can you think of the things? Let's talk to the audience. What are the risks of not having your counterpart when that has been how you've always made decisions or how you have always progressed?
Yeah, I mean, you might shut down. You might not think through things the same way. Well, you're definitely not going to think through things the same way.
Right.
And that brainstorming, collaboration, innovation that bubbles up isn't going to be there yet. I mean, you have to be very intentional to find that person,
right,
and start building that trust and that relationship, which you also are running the business, and there's a lot going on there. So
let's say that you have a strength of getting shit done, like you move, okay?
Then you're going to be micromanaging.
But without your counterpart, that strength might be overdone. You might move things along too fast because you haven't had the person that says, let's take a beat.
Yep.
Let's think through some things. Let's take care of that.
Correct.
You might know you're a person who moves things along very quickly, but just think of all the strengths that you have. If you overuse a strength and you don't have somebody who is
going to catch
tempering, right, catching it, your strength might be too big.
And then you're stressed. Your stress is going to go up, right?
Right.
Because you don't have that person, that connection, that other opinion, that person that's bantering with you and giving you feedback. And as your stress elevates, it's even harder for you to stretch away from what's easy,
right,
which is your strengths, right? So then you're going to lean into them even more, and people are going to see that,
right?
Experience
that. And your counterpart is going to be the one that shows you what your blind spots are. Mm-hmm. They're going to be the one that says, if you didn't know that you moved too fast, that you haven't thought through all the steps, you went from A to X as opposed to B and C, then you aren't having somebody to slow you down. If you're that person who has, are you the person who people are comfortable sharing, hey, by the way, you need to pay attention to this and have your blind spots. If you're not, your blind spots are going to be very much more visible to everybody else than maybe what they are today.
Yes.
And most of us have a counterpart that does the opposite. If I'm too fast, somebody will slow me down, right? If I'm much more aggressive, somebody might give me some tempering of what's going on. And so how do you've got to have, there's a lot of risks in us not having yin and yang if you've created success with one.
Correct. And then the greater risk is who do I start building that trust with? And if I'm not careful, I might not. I think there's a bigger consequence to that.
You become either isolated because you're worried that you're going to overdo or underdo something.
Yep.
And so you just don't, and I think there's a risk in that your team is going to notice something's different. And so as you see the risk or you see that this is different, it's like, oh, is Michelle going through something? Kind of. But we don't know what it is.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not recognizing it because
I'm not sharing it.
Yes.
Okay. Or maybe your decision making is different. It slows down or it's speeded up and it's not always thought out, or it's overthought because you're second guessing yourself. But your folks are going to see something different, and they may even reference, the person who left. Well, when so-and-so left, then Michelle started doing this, or your coworker started doing that, and now the system is different. You're not different, but the system is different. I think we have to pay attention.
How your process. And I think it just is what it is, and having awareness of who is my go-to, and if they're not there, what am I going to do?
Well, so let's talk about that. Because all of us who have a counterpart, right? Some of us have spouses. That's our counterpart in parts of our world. Some of us have a peer at work, and that's our counterpart. Some of us have a small group of VPs or, our cabinet that's our, so knowing that our person is leaving, what are some ways that you can find a new counterpart or get those things taken care of? Any suggestions that you have for our audience?
Well, one, it's just obviously recognizing this is where I'm at.
Okay,
right.
Start there.
I think first we have to. I mean, it's bigger than I think a lot of times we give it credit for. Right. We don't think it's that big of a deal necessarily.
Maybe not even recognizing what it is. It's just like I'm different.
Correct. And so I think recognizing that, and then it is looking at though. So you have a yin and yang, but who is my peer? Who is that group of people that I am going to be surrounded with? And I've got to now prioritize, and hopefully sooner than later. So if the conversation in my perspective can happen before this person leaves, right? Talking a little bit about how we help each other and what are the things that you catch yourself doing to catch me or to help me in just gleam in a little, learn a little more of what are they like. They unconsciously do it. They don't even realize it possibly, but what are some of those things? But then be intentional of who on that team, because it doesn't have to be just one person either.
Right.
It can be the team, but I need to start being intentional, even having that, for 15 years, it's been the two of us, and now it's just me. And with that, I'm going to really lean on this team.
Right.
Looking at that perspective, I think that's one option. I think there's also the option of a coach, that outside perspective, who's not in the business can challenge you as well. Maybe that's something you do in the transition to see how that helps, right?
Well, and many of the people that we coach at the senior level, they may have a counterpart on the team in the business, but as a coach, we end up also being that. So they're not at risk having only one; they have more than one person that they can check in on. I know others that have CEO groups or peer groups that they have. I have a peer group that I've worked with for 20 some years, and sometimes I just need that gut check. I just need that, am I crazy? And the answer is probably yes, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea of, let me bounce this off of someone before I lay it out there, because I'm already gone through the change curve.
Yeah.
Right? And other people may not have. And so just having a peer group to do that. So peer groups, an executive coach, bringing in someone and your own peer group, but making sure it doesn't really feel like you're playing favorites. You've got to be careful.
No, that's why I'm like, is it that team?
Right.
I don't know what that team is, right? And the dynamics all depend on each environment, but getting more comfortable with having the conversations with that entire, let's just say the executive group, where, you have, if there's 3, 4, 5, whatever that number is, but getting more comfortable with having those conversations and being intentional to build that trust so you all can lean on each other.
As we said earlier, having a counterpart is so valuable. Having someone who can, you can run things past, who can help you do a gut check, who can help you identify some of your blind spots that you need to address, how you can use your strengths in the ways that maybe you haven't, and recognize that when that's gone, you're going to be different. So how can you replace the things that were provided by your counterpart to fulfill how you're going to move forward? Because the business is going to be different, and your decision making will be different as you bring those folks forward. So as we tie this up, I agree with you when you said earlier, people don't give this enough credit, that as people move on, there's an emotional facet that we need to pay attention to. There is a strategic perspective that we need to be paying attention to. And through these transition, we don't know always when somebody else is going to leave. It isn't always planned, right? So there's
lots of ways or whys that people leave, intentionally, unintentionally.
Exactly.
So
And so taking a look and also recognizing that you're going to have people that you lead that also have counterparts, and they're going to need to find their counterpart and what is it that they're looking for and how do they find that person, because however it showed up, it came about very naturally. And so not only supporting yourself, but also supporting those others that are going through that.
Yes.
I'm really glad that we brought this subject up, because I think it's really important that people recognize it. And so if you have more questions on this particular topic, don't forget to, hit subscribe and, follow us on with some of the other episodes. But also reach out to us, because we'd be more than happy to share some ideas of, how we can help you work through this transition. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss another episode.